Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here, and in this video I'm going to talk about Twist, and I'm going to talk about the Twist meta and talk about all the best decks that you can play in the current Twist format. And the current Twist format for October 2023 is the Wonders XL. So you can freely put between 30 and 40 cards into your deck, and your starting health is the number of cards in your deck. So you can start with 40 health if you run a 40 card deck, you start with 30 health if you run a 30 card deck. And other than that, it's still the Wonders format, so only old expansions, no current standard expansions whatsoever. And, well, there were some balance changes at the end of the September season, because we had a situation where only 3 classes basically were dominating the game, those being Rogue, Warlock and Warrior. And now the balance changes changed the situation somewhat, but on the other hand, the XL format also changed the situation, and not necessarily for the better. We're mainly running in a 3-class format right now. Paladin, Rogue and Warlock are by far the most played classes. Twist play numbers are lower than before, it's even less popular than before. And why is that? Well, that is because the XL format makes the game slower, because you can start with 40 health, so it's harder for an aggro deck to kill you. And that makes expensive cards, which are typically some slower cards, more important, and that makes Twist even more expensive than it used to be. So it's great for somebody like me, who has been playing the game since beta, and I have never disenchanted my old cards. I have all of that stuff still remaining. So yeah, I can play all of these decks, and I do enjoy Twist a lot. I think Twist is a wonderful experience actually. It's lower power level than Standard, so the games don't go by as quickly. There's less randomness than in Standard, so decisions really matter. Resources really matter, because there's also less draw than in Standard. So you can actually run your opponent out of resources. That can happen in Twist. So it's much more old school Hearthstone feel. But now with the XL format, the game is more expensive than it used to be, because the budget decks are much weaker now. And that is obviously a big barrier to entry. Also, 3-class format, Paladin, Rogue and Warlock. Actually, I think there are many decks that could exist beyond those. There just aren't that many players playing, so we don't have statistics and we don't have that much innovation going on, so yeah, that's a bit of a bummer. I am able to get a Twist game whenever I want, so it's not like the game mode is so dead that you actually can't get a game. You can get a game, but still the statistics are really low on this one. Anyway, let's take a look at the main decks in the format. There are 3 that are like really the meta decks. I will take a look at those 3 last. I will talk about budget decks first, then I will talk about some of the challengers to the existing meta decks, and then I will talk about the top meta decks. When it comes to budget decks, Hunter is of course always in the discussion. And this Face Hunter deck, I believe this is Corbett's list of Face Hunter from the previous season, is the only Hunter deck that really sees play right now. There used to be the Jormungandr list, which was one of the top decks in the previous meta, but that Jormungandr list was killed with Trial of the Jormungandrs being made more expensive, and it's no longer viable. So now it's back to this, and this can be built really cheaply, because Snake Trap is not that great actually. You could cut both Snake Trap and the Mad Scientist, replace them with something else, or you can just replace Snake Trap with another secret. For example, Cat Trick is a pretty good alternative. So yeah, you can get into Twist, sort of, with this kind of cheap deck. The problem is that this deck is not that great in the current meta. It's hard to deal 40 damage, for example, with this deck. And another cheap deck that you can use to get into Twist has been Discard Warlock. Discard Warlock was one of the best decks last season, but Discard Warlock is hit with multiple nerfs. Tyrant of Evil was nerfed, Dark Bargain was nerfed. Here we can see the 3-mana Dark Bargain, now it's a 4-mana Dark Bargain. In this list, Dark Bargain is the only epic card. It does improve the performance of the list, so if you want to play Discard Warlock at its best, you want to include Dark Bargain. But you can replace that with Darkshire Librarians, and boom, you have a budget deck. Again, the problem is that it's just not that great. Like, looking at all ranks data, both the Hunter deck and this Warlock deck are able to get above 50%. But that just means that they're winning some games in bronze, and then once you get a little bit higher, then they start to lose and lose more and more. Whereas previous season, this deck, instant legend basically. Really easy legend deck. But the nerfs, Chamber of Visitors nerf, Dark Bargain nerf, Night of Evil nerf. They did the job, and this is no longer one of the main contenders. So, because of the nerfs and because of the Excel format, the budget decks took a really big hit. However, outside of the budget decks, there are some off-meta contenders that you can play if you just have the cards to do that. So, finding these decks is a really hard thing because, for example, this deck, you can't see this on HS Replay, you can't even find this on Donkey, you can find this on, like, Twitter. Anyway, here's one. So, Dragon Priest, a tempo Dragon Priest that Yasuton played. According to him, it's 34 wins, 19 losses, 64% win rate. Yeah, so some kind of alternatives do exist, but we just don't have enough statistics to really tell whether they're actually good. But Priest seems to be one of the classes that's underappreciated at the moment, like this deck shows. Also, I built this deck, so if you want to play an expensive deck, yeah, that's a lot of legendary cards right there. But this is my XL Reno Control Priest. And I had a great time playing with this deck. So yeah, you can play. There's a lot of unexplored room still in Twist. And you can play decks like these if you have the cards. But thing is, no one really has the cards, so yeah, that kind of sucks. But anyway, Priest is one of those classes that actually has some potential in the current Twist format. It just doesn't have the numbers. So from here, every deck I'm going to present is going to be either a Paladin, a Warlock, or a Rogue deck. But even those have some off-meta options, especially Paladin. There's one clear winner when it comes to Paladin decks, but there's also some off-meta Paladin decks, like on Donkey's site I found this list, which is a secret Paladin using the buffed Mysterious Challenger. Mysterious Challenger used to cost 6, but nowadays it only costs 5 mana. So yeah, going for the Christmas tree, that's something that you can try, but again, there are like 100 games played with this deck, so who knows whether it's actually playable. I sure don't, but it's still one of the more promising looking candidates. Also, you can play Anyfin Paladin. I have a video of Anyfin Paladin from last season, which I felt was really good. The current most played Anyfin Paladin deck is this one, with Nesot the Corruptor in it. So you have both Anything can happen and you have Nesot, you have a couple of wing additions there. Just a little bit more pressure against those 40 health decks. Valstan Staghelm is actually optional. It's not that great in the deck. It's like okay, but not super strong. So you don't necessarily have to craft that expensive new legendary card just to play this deck. But yeah, it's another deck that has a lot of legendary cards. And it's an archetype that you can only basically play in Twist, so people just generally don't have the cards to play with it. This one also has fairly small sample size, but I'm a little bit more confident that this is a real deck than I am about Secret Paladin, although both seem to have some promise. Then there are also some competing rogue decks, and the weaker of the competing main rogue decks is currently the Khotun Jade Rogue. So Khotun and Jades actually fit quite nicely in a deck together, but now with Blade of Khotun nerfed to 7 mana, it used to be 6 mana, it just isn't that strong anymore compared to just running pure Jade. So you can play with this. This is a deck that you can actually climb with if you are so inclined, but there are better rogue decks out there. Kind of the same applies to Warlock, because the main Warlock archetype nowadays is Handlock. And this is very traditional Handlock. I mean, I love this kind of Handlock. Just playing with Leroy, Faceless Manipulator, Emperor. So you get the discounts, Leroy, Faceless, Power Overwhelming. You can sometimes max some 20 damage, sometimes even a little bit more than 20 damage right from hand. So you have Handlock, it's not an OTK deck, it's not a combo deck. You still have your Mountain Giants and stuff, you still have your Nesot, you have all of that. And then you also have some surprise bursts, so just a really fun deck to play. But not the best Handlock archetype, this one, either. Because now we get into the actual top 3, the actual 3 meta Tyrant decks. And one of them is a Handlock, but it's the Khotun variant of Handlock. So you got that Leroy package, which is sad because Leroy package is so fun. But what you gain is a lot of defensive strength, because you buff up your Khotun, then you have Ice Stalks of Khotun with their Taunt and Lifesteal, you have Twin Emperor Veclor, which is really strong, one of the best cards in this deck, and you still have burst damage through Khotun. So you have your Mountain Giant, threats, and then you have your Khotun defensive tools, and then you have Khotun's Burst, and that's the third best deck in Twist at the moment. And the second best deck in Twist at the moment is Jade Rogue. So you don't do the Khotun stuff anymore now that it was nerfed a little. Obviously Jade Rogue also was nerfed a little because Jade Telegram used to cost 3, now it costs 4. Scarab Lord also was nerfed a little bit. So this deck is now weaker than it used to be previous season, but making big Jade still delivers that damage. So you can still challenge stuff like 40 health Handlocks, for example. So Jade Rogue without the Khotun stuff is the second best deck in Twist. And the best deck in Twist, I have already featured this before in a deck video on this channel, is the Handbuff Paladin. Yeah, Handbuff Paladin. I mean, with Timeless Blessing, with all of this stuff, you just make so big minions, and then you sometimes have like a 13 attack Leroy going straight for the face, and it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of burst, and it's the best deck in the game. Note that Don Hancho is one of the weakest performing cards in this list. That's something that I have been asked about a couple of times. You don't have to run Don Hancho, you can replace it with various other Paladin cards, so don't worry about that one too much. But yeah, this is just the epitome of the current meta. So that's the Twist meta in a nutshell. We have the Handbuff Paladin, the Jade Rogue, and the Khotun Handlock, and those three are the clear main decks. Then we have some alternatives, like the variants with the Jade Khotun Rogue and with the Handlock without Khotun package, and we have some Paladin challengers in the form of Anyfin Paladin, also Secret Paladin. And beyond those, our stats really start to end, so like, I know anecdotally that Priest has a couple of decent decks. I know that people have also been playing a bunch of Druid decks. There's some Malygos Druid decks that people have been playing, for example. But statistics, the little statistics I've seen about those just don't seem that promising. So I'm not sure if Druid is going to be a viable contender in this meta. Maybe it is. We just don't know that much because there's so few players, so little experimentation, so little innovation going on. And even if someone innovates a deck, then proving that it's actually a good deck, that's the difficult part as well. But anyway, I do enjoy the Twist Wonders Excel format a lot. I think this is a tremendously fun format. As a downside, it's a tremendously expensive format. As you can see from all of these sample decks, many of them run multiple legendary cards that you have no other uses for. And that really limits its popularity, but if you happen to have the cards to build some of these decks, then I do highly recommend trying out the format because I think it's a lot of fun. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.